everybody, today I'm in a park actually in CARMEL, Indiana, but really close to Indianapolis, Indiana. And parks are pretty popular in the summer across the entire Midwest because the weather's usually pretty good. So we're gonna talk in this video just a little bit about what the summer is like in Indianapolis and of course all the cities and towns that surround Indianapolis. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If you want to know everything there is to know about living in a place like this, Indianapolis, CARMEL, Indiana, Greenwood, Indiana, Plainfield, Indiana, any of the cities and towns that surround Indianapolis, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video. Now we have people reaching out to us from all over the country with questions about Indianapolis, what the summer's like, what the winter's like, neighborhoods, different cities and towns that surround Indianapolis, and neighborhoods inside of Indianapolis, of course. If you have questions about any of those things, then make sure you reach out to us any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back whenever it comes time for you to make your move to any city, town surrounding Indianapolis or Indianapolis itself. So in this video, we're going to talk about the summer. And obviously today I'm in a park, not terribly crowded. It's a really early morning on a weekday. So during school, actually, this video is being shot during August and most of the schools are back in at this point. So while it's still technically summer is kind of over for everybody as far as summer activities, things like that, unless they spill over into the weekend or sometime after school. But most people have a feeling as to what the winter is like in the Midwest. We have hard winters. We don't get nearly as much snow as what people might think. We get just roughly 22 inches of snow a year around Indianapolis. Some years it's a little bit more and some years it's a little bit less, but when you spread that out over 4-ish months or so, 22 inches, that's really not a lot of snow. So we don't have snow on the ground all winter long. In fact, we just go through small periods where there's snow on the ground. Most of winter, the ground is bare. There's no snow at all. So that's a little surprising to people, but the summer is also one of those seasons that could be a little bit surprising. So it depends on where you're from. If you're from the Midwest, you got a pretty good idea as to what the summer's like, but if you're from the South or the Southwest or places like California, especially really dry places, desert-like places, then the Midwest, Indianapolis summer could be a little bit of a mystery to you. So if you look at the statistics here, July is typically the hottest month. The average temperature is about 75 degrees, but that can be a little bit tricky because 75 degrees isn't the average high, not at all. That is the average temperature for an average day in July. So it takes into account the low temperature and also the high temperature. So here in the Midwest, in Indianapolis, our warmest months definitely are June, July, and August, where most of the warmest months are in the entire country. So how hot does it get here? Well, usually in the summer, at night, it gets down into the 60s. Sometimes it might be upper 60s. There are times when it might get into the 50s, the upper 50s. It depends on what kind of weather system we have moving through, but usually you can count on somewhere in the 60s. Probably like 65, somewhere in there we'll say. And then during the day, you can count on lower, mid, maybe upper 80s for most of the summer. So 82, 83 is a really common temperature, but of course the temperature can get up to 89, 90 degrees, and even over 90 degrees. That does happen, but usually during the summer, we don't have too many days that get over 90 degrees. We absolutely get some. We'll get a handful of them here and there, but we don't have too many over 90 degrees. And it has, in fact, gone over 100 degrees around this area before. And I think that the record temperature of all time is 106 degrees. And that happened a long, long time ago, about 90 years ago or so. So pretty rare to back in the 1930s where it hit 106 degrees compared to today. This year, it hasn't hit 100 degrees. I don't think it hit 100 degrees last year. I can't remember the last time it actually hit 100 degrees. That is exceptionally hot. But if you live in the desert, hitting 100 degrees is really common for you. But the big question, of course, with that heat, especially when you compare here to the Midwest, around Indianapolis, in the desert, what is the humidity like? I mean, that is when people live in those regions and they've been to the Midwest maybe just a little bit or never been to the Midwest, they want to know what that humidity is like. And in the summer, there's no getting around it. It is humid. It absolutely is. And the temperature right now where I'm standing, again, it's in the morning, so it's really pretty pleasant. It's low 70s right now, and today it's supposed to get up to about 86 degrees. But in the morning especially, And in the evening, when that sun goes down, you can really feel that humidity. Because right now the humidity is about 85% or so. Now the humidity will go down as the temperature goes up. We'd have to get into a whole explanation of how relative humidity works and how warmer air holds moisture and colder air holds less moisture, but you can still have same humidities. And the point is that a high humidity obviously is uncomfortable. And when you combine that with a high temperature, it can be exceptionally uncomfortable, because the higher the temperature, your body wants to sweat. But if the humidity is really high, the sweat can't evaporate, and that's what helps cool your body. So it makes it pretty difficult. So in the summer, absolutely, it's humid. But is it as humid as some other places in the country? I don't think so. So if you go into the South, if you vacation in Florida, any beach town, or if you go to the Carolinas, or if you go to Gulf Shores, Alabama, something like that, or even into Georgia or Mississippi, the humidity through there, even north of that into Tennessee, the humidity through there is a notch above what we experience here. And in part, that has to do with the discomfort. It may not necessarily be the higher percentage on the humidity, but also a slightly higher temperature. So if it's 90 degrees there, but 85 or 84 degrees here, it's slightly cooler. And you might feel that, even though the humidities might be close to the same, maybe 65% or 50% or something like that. If it's 90 degrees and the humidity is 50%, that's pretty uncomfortable, definitely. That's quite sticky. But the nights is where it really becomes an issue, and certainly in the morning too. But the night is maybe a little bit worse than the morning, because at night, when the sun goes down, it's still relatively warm, but that humidity jacks up really fast. So if you're in the South, it might still be 80 degrees at 9 o'clock at night, maybe even 10 o'clock at night. Here, it's probably cooled off a little bit more than that. It might have gotten down to 75 or somewhere in that range, but that humidity can still be really high. It can be close to 100%. So in the South, it's warmer with high humidity. And here, in this area of the country, around Indianapolis, it's a little cooler with high humidity. So you can interpret that as being just a little bit more comfortable. But you're not going to escape it. It's going to be humid here during the summer. There's no doubt about it. But the length of time where it's really hot and sticky is absolutely shorter than what you're going to have in the South. And that's just because our summers are obviously a little bit shorter than what you have in the South. It takes a little longer to warm up here, and it takes a little less time for it to cool off in the fall here. But when you get in that spring and the fall, those are phenomenal times in the Midwest. Really pleasant, not terribly humid, not terribly hot. It kind of gets into that zone of weather that's kind of perfect. It's not that way consistently all spring or all fall long, but you get a lot of days that are like that. But that summer absolutely is consistent for the most part, it being hot and humid. Now, what about rainfall? Because people think in the Midwest we have tornadoes all the time and thunderstorms all the time. We don't have tornadoes all the time. Tornadoes are actually, even in the Midwest where they do occur for the most part in the entire country, they're still exceptionally rare. They don't happen all that much. It's one of those things that can certainly happen with thunderstorms, but not very often. Most thunderstorms are pretty tame. So they'll have thunder, lightning, maybe a little bit of wind, but mostly it's thunder and lightning. But the big thing from thunderstorms is the rain. So we actually get a fair amount of rainfall around Indianapolis during the year. We get close to 43 inches of rain a year. And a lot of that rain happens during the summer. July is the wettest month typically. We get 4 to 5 inches of rain in there or so. But May, June, along with July, it's roughly 4 to 5 inches of rain. And then of course the rest of the rain is spread out throughout the entire year. The national average, I think, is somewhere around 38 inches. So that takes into account really wet places in the country, really dry places in the country, and Indianapolis falls just a little bit above average, and it is typically because of those thunderstorms. We actually get more rain than Seattle does. Seattle, Washington, which is the place that's really known for its rainfall, doesn't get as much. They get roughly 38 inches of rain a year. The thing about Seattle is that they get rain on a lot of days during the year, but it's just not very much. It's just barely a measurable amount on a lot of days. And it gets things a little bit wet, but it's not a lot of rain. So if you're in a thunderstorm and it rains an inch or maybe 2 inches, something like that, over the course of maybe an hour or a couple hours, now that would be a lot of rain, heck of a lot of rain. But you can certainly have a thunderstorm that comes through and dumps half an inch of rain. That is really going to soak things than just having this light mist over everything. Not even close to comparable. So we actually do get a little bit more rain than Seattle, which is pretty amazing. Actually, the rainiest place in the country, I think, is Mobile, Alabama. They get something like 67 or 68 inches of rain a year, and that's because they're right there on the Gulf of Mexico. It's all this warm, wet air is constantly flowing over the top of them, so they get a lot of thunderstorms through the year. and it's far enough south to where they don't get any snow, so any kind of system that comes over the top of them, it's going to be in the form of rain. So that is a fairly rainy place, even though they get a ton of sun down there too. They get a lot of rain quickly whenever the storms come over the top of them. Just kind of like we do, we just don't get nearly as much because we're in a drier part of the country than what a place like Mobile, Alabama is. So even though we do have relatively wet summers, even though it doesn't rain every day, not even close to that in the summer. In fact, we get periods of time, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks where it doesn't rain at all. We kind of have a dry spell or a small drought during the summer, and it seems to happen towards the end of the summer oftentimes. But we can have little spells like that for sure. But it's not raining all the time, not every day, and sometimes you might have some stretches where every few days you get a shower, but sometimes it doesn't hit the entire city. It might hit the north side, but not the south side. It might hit the west side, but not the east side. So it can be very spotty, and that's just kind of how thunderstorms work, where you can be talking to somebody on the phone and they say, it's pouring down rain here, and on the other side of the city, it's bright and sunny. You might be able to see the storm off in the distance, but it's not affecting you at all. So that is kind of a misconception a lot of people have, is that we get a lot of thunderstorms, maybe a lot of rain, maybe it rains a lot or very often. It just comes in bunches. But there's one thing for sure. You might not have those thunderstorms, but I can promise you with that heat and humidity, you're going to get it here in Indianapolis. It's just not going to be quite as bad as it is in some other places of the country. But if you have questions at all about summer, what it's like here during the summer, probably best if you were here during the summer to experience a little bit of it, but if you have some questions, make sure you reach out. Anyways, you know how. And until the next one, we'll see you later.